Look, 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 look. Look at this. Somebody come look at this. Look at this. Somebody come and look at this.
Enjoy. A recent study undertaken by the German Research Foundation claimed that ancient Egyptians shared more ancestry with Near Easterners than present-day Egyptians and Africans. The study took genetic samples from pre-Ptolemaic, Ptolemaic and Roman-era mummies, suggesting there is genetic continuity between the ancient Egyptians and modern Eastern Mediterraneans, the Turkish and modern Near Eastern populations. To the uninformed general public, the study seemed conclusive. However, as is too often the case in Egyptology, not all was as it seemed. The study failed to reference that the ethnicity of the mummies irrefutably biased the results of the test. In fact, the outcomes, given the origin of the sample material, should not have been a surprise at all. For the samples used in this study were taken exclusively from a Fayum burial ground in Abu Sir el-Melek. It was alleged by the research team that this choice would provide a fair snapshot of the ancient Egyptian population, yet the choice of location and date of the mummies guaranteed the probability of having genuine Egyptians in the sample group to be virtually zero, as it is common knowledge amongst historians that these tombs had been under exclusive foreign occupation for several thousands of years. An article from UCL confirms this. It states, in the Ptolemaic period, the Fayum was one of the main regions where Greeks settled. Encyclopedia Britannica, in support of this, writes, Greek settlers were brought to the area, creating prosperous Hellenistic communities. Historical researcher Joanna Wilimowska states that statistical analysis revealed that Greek settlers constituted about 30% of the total population of the Fayum in the mid-3rd century BC. Bear in mind, this constitutes the very start of the Ptolemaic era, and thus would have significantly risen over time. Ancient Origins writes, it is known that the Fayum population exploded during the Ptolemaic period by the settling of numerous Greek veteran soldiers there. The district of Fayum was a known immigration settlement since the Second Intermediary period under Hyksos rule, and became the most significant settlement for Greek immigrants during the Ptolemy period. The World History Encyclopedia writes, Ptolemy I and his immediate successor, Ptolemy II, devoted significant attention to the Fayum, repairing and renovating the monuments, temples, canals, and administrative buildings which had fallen into decay. Ptolemy allocated lots of this fertile region to Greek and Macedonian veterans, so it is unanimous that in that particular region, although situated in Middle Egypt, was in all likelihood the least native settlement in all of Kemet. But what of the burial chambers themselves? Of the specific burial chambers in Abu Sir el-Melek, the World Monuments Fund states, the cemetery continued to be used for centuries, with the earlier shaft tombs being filled with later burials from the Greek, Roman, and Islamic periods. Thousands of individuals were buried at the site over hundreds of years of use. This confirms that not only were the Ptolemaic mummies tested definitely not native, but also the tombs, which were carbon dated as pre-Ptolemaic tombs, were likely usurped by Hellenized settlers to the region. It is likely none of the mummies tested were native Egyptians. Indeed, the selection of this tomb in this district of Egypt was not born from an effort to obtain a sample set representative of the Kemetic population, but rather it was a cynical attempt to obtain the least native and most European DNA available, and pass it off to the obliging media as proof of ancient Egyptian affinity to modern Europe. As a disclaimer to the seemingly obvious foreign origin of the samples used for this study, the authors simply stated, a general issue concerning the site is that several details of the context of the individuals analyzed in this study were lost over time. Yet throughout the paper they have, with gusto, classified said individuals as ancient Egyptians, confident in the knowledge that a majority of the general public do not possess the patience or the reading comprehension to challenge such a claim. It seems now in Egyptology that total ambiguity is an acceptable variable when making such outlandish claims as to the ethnic origins of an entire civilization.
Oh, hell no!
This is proven by the leading premise of the study that was aimed to force their fallacious interpretation of this data in the way it was being presented. The opening paragraph states, "Our analyses reveal that ancient Egyptians shared more ancestry with Near Easterners than present-day Egyptians." Who received additional sub-Saharan admixture in more recent times. This is not an exercise of objective exploration, but rather an attempt to lean the unsuspecting public towards support of the foreign, rather than indigenous origin of ancient Egyptian people. In the end, the study provided no representation for the possibility of an indigenous origin, and seemed to suggest there was no indigenous material that made up ancient and modern Egyptians. They are all simply the result of either Levantine or Mediterranean settlers. This robs not only Africa, but also ancient and present Egyptians of an entirely African accomplishment.
A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit.